just the one you sent me was highlighted.
Oh.
So I believe we have Margo Coppus, Jim Dinning, Sean McLean, Ian Cartwright, and Elizabeth McDermott, correct?
Yes, those are the names that we have too.
Thank you. Margo, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
You bet. And you have 5 minutes, and the clock is ticking.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am Margo Coppus. I'm the Development Director for Elbow Park. We appreciate all the thought and work that has gone into getting the guidebook to this point, but in our opinion, it's not quite there yet. We don't dispute the need for creating a compacter, walkable city and making use of existing infrastructure, but this can happen in a way that respects the character of the established neighborhoods. First of all, I would like to say that we fully support the Alboya amendment that was mentioned in the panel 1. And in the letter that I have submitted on behalf of Elbow Park Residents Association, I have outlined our concerns and suggested amendments in more detail. But now I will just focus on one of our main concerns with the current version of the guidebook. In our opinion, it does threaten the unique character of not only the historic inner city neighborhoods, but all established neighborhoods. To appreciate our concerns, I would like you to think about when you take a walk through one of our older neighborhoods, what gives it that comfortable feeling and uniqueness? It's not just the individual homes, it's also the streetscape with generous yards and mature urban tree canopy. In the current version of the guidebook, almost all of these streets won't meet the required 2 criteria to qualify for lowest intensity, which means that all of these streets would be game for some form of upzoning. So don't keep telling us that we are spreading misinformation. There's just not enough criteria. Yes, it is true that the guidebook in itself won't change zoning, but it will make it attractive for developers to buy homes and get approval for upzoning because it aligns with the goals of the guidebook. Very likely, this will result in increased lot coverage, and I emphasize that, increased lot coverage. Smaller front yards, removal of mature trees. If this happens on a few more properties, you have to admit that the street will start to look and feel different. And despite the reassurance that communities can decide where density will go in developing the local area plan, we still have to follow the guidebook recipe and use the ingredients given, and there are a lot of ingredients missing. Sorry, I think I had it on speakerphone. Now let me ask, the guidebook is supposed to bring certainty to future development and prevent spot zoning. It seems to me that it has the opposite effect. Maybe more certainty for developers, but definitely not for the average citizen. Now let me ask you, why would established communities have to allow for different housing forms on one street while new communities are not planned that way? The guidebook states neighborhoods are well designed and create a sense of place that fosters identity and pride in a community. So why the urge to change historic neighborhoods that are vibrant and desirable and already have the identity and where residents take pride in their community? Don't destroy what has taken decades to evolve. Why the need for to densify the inner city? There are incorrect assumptions being made that all inner city communities are in need of revitalization, that younger families are moving out, schools are not full, and homes are at the end of their lifespan. But look at Elbow Park. Our schools are at capacity. Lots of century homes are in excellent condition. People of all ages move here because of the spaciousness and the park-like character and the proximity to amenities. Why haven't the current changes to the economic and COVID-related market being taken in consideration? People are looking for more space, not less. Why can't there be an urban forum for single-family homes which recognizes the uniqueness of some of our older neighborhoods? To conclude, this is not about being elitist or exclusionary, but about preserving the little bit of heritage this city has and the character of older neighborhoods that have taken decades to evolve. We are not against carefully planned densification, but until we have satisfactory answers to these questions and see in writing that we will have a meaningful voice in the decision-making process and that the future developments will respect the identity, character, and historic assets of our communities, we cannot support the current version of the guidebook and recommend that it be referred back to administration for amendments. Thank you for allowing us to voice our concerns, and hopefully you will consider these.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coppus, for your presentation. And now we have the Honorable Jim Dinning, and no telling stories out of school, okay? You got 5 minutes.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Deputy Mayor and members of Council. My name is Jim Dinning. I realized as I was getting ready today that I'm a third-generation resident of Elbow Park. And in fact, generations 4 and 5 are also resident in the community. I would just simply say that I agree with all that was said by the first 6 speakers and then Margo, who was just up to bat. And I applaud them all for the emotion that Denise Ross showed and that she brought to the conversation. Many of us fervently believe we live in a great community. We live in a great community today. So telling residents of Elbow Park that we need a guidebook to make great communities leaves us all a little skeptical, to frankly, to say the least. I live in what I'm told is a Zone A community, which according to page 48 of the guidebook is most appropriate for residential infill. So really what I'm concerned is that the guidebook, once law, will be used as a tool for developers and builders to buy up and subdivide and build infills and other more intense, dense housing with little regard for the community or for its character and what gets left behind after they've cleaned up. So I ask the question, what really is the problem that the guidebook is out to solve? Specifically in communities like whether it's Meadowlark Park or Alboya or Britannia or my own community of Elbow Park or Rideau, Roxborough, Mount Royal or Scarborough, what is the problem with those communities that the guidebook will fix? My worry is that, I'll say, some of the soothing assurances I've heard from councillors that the guidebook is merely a guideline or that it will not change the planning and development process. Well, it is, as it says on page 4 of the document, it is a statutory document that guides how a local area plan accommodates growth and development of a community through the application of urban form categories. And then if it's not going to lead to change in planning and development, why are we going through this process? And I must say, around the statutory thing, I was surprised that the mayor, at the outset of this conversation, asked the question of administration why this wasn't a policy matter, and that was it really a statutory approval, and the fact that some councillor has told me that it's a guideline, and the mayor would ask that kind of a question, makes me, frankly, nervous. And then I'd ask if when the mayor comes back into the chair, I hope that the mayor will re-ask the question, what triggers a local area plan? What if a community doesn't want or doesn't ask for a local area plan, and in fact it's brought on by a construction or a constructor or a builder or a developer? He didn't get an answer to that specific question, and I hope he'll ask it. I admit I've read the guidebook. I listened to the promotional introduction of the guidebook today. I heard the soothing assurances of how much better Calgary will be if council passes the guidebook bylaw. The only thing, frankly, missing was the spa music. And I would say that I went through it quickly, and I did a word search for things like winter. Winter. It showed up twice in 130 pages. And in 130 pages, there are 2 pictures of Calgary with snow. And one of the pictures has Calgary with snow with a plowed street in a residential area. That hasn't happened in the 21st century. And the same with river. The Bow River is mentioned twice, and the Elbow River isn't mentioned at all. So the guidebook is a planner's document, even a developer and builder's document full of planning speak and words that will light up the eyes of builders and developers. And that's why you're hearing the suspicion and pushback today. So like Margo, my ask is that you send it back to its authors and ask them to bring it back with a heavy dose of reality. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Denning, for coming today. And now we have Mr. Sean McLean. Are you there, Sean?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Hello, so good evening, Madam Deputy Mayor and Council. My name is Sean McLean, and I am a registered professional planner with over a decade of planning and development experience throughout Western Canada. Today I'm here speaking as the Director of Development on behalf of the Killarney Glengarry Community Association in support of the Guidebook for Great Communities. The City of Calgary has a long history of approving planning guidebooks to facilitate the creation of further local area plans. To date, the City has approved numerous planning guidebooks, including the New Communities Planning Guidebook in 2014, the Center City Guidebook in 2017, and the Developed Areas Guidebook in 2017 as well, not to mention the numerous amendments to these documents approved by Council over the years. When the approach of using a planning guidebook was first introduced, it was an innovative city approach. The creation and implementation of the first guidebook became an instant success as it ensured that local area plans that followed did not have to start from scratch and reinvent policies. By creating the building blocks for local area plans, it led to plans being completed under budget and ahead of schedule. Previous to this, area structure plans done by the City of Calgary took over 3 years. Afterwards, they were being completed in less than one. These plans were also done to an extremely high quality. In fact, the Cornerstone Area Structure Plan, which was the first local plan to be completed under the guidebook process, received an honorable mention in 2015 at the Mayor's Urban Design Awards, and was the subject of a panel discussion on planning best practices at the 2015 Alberta Professional Planners Institute Conference. To date, there are a significant number of developed communities without any local area plan. Those communities with local plans have plans that are drastically out of date and no longer provide a functional purpose for guiding development. These plans are woefully inadequate, and do not reflect modern-day resident expectations, land use economics, or development patterns. For instance, the current Killarney Glengarry Area Redevelopment Plan was passed on March 10, 1986. This is such a long time ago that the plan is actually now older than I am. The city itself has also fundamentally changed since then. In 1986, Calgary's population was just over 600,000 people. As of 2020, Calgary's population is now over 1.5 million, making that approximately 250% population increase over that time. This is a fundamental change that has dramatic impacts on how the city will continue to grow. Regardless of the quality of the ARP back in 1986, or the subsequent amendments in the years that followed, it no longer reflects the modern-day needs of the community. This out-of-date policy framework has encouraged ad hoc planning with one-off redesignation applications and ARP amendments. This has been extremely detrimental as it creates uncertainty not only for local residents, but also uncertainty for the business community as well. This lack of an up-to-date planning direction is not unique to our community, as there are numerous local area plans that date back to the 1980s and 1990s. This uncertainty of what is to be expected has led to numerous conflicts between neighbors, discouragement of community and business investment, and reduced economic growth potential. Approval of the guidebook is integral to the furtherance of the creation of numerous local area plans, including the Westbrook Community's local area plan. These policy plans provide communities with the opportunity to restore certainty, create complete communities, spur economic growth, and restore confidence to the business community. There have been some concerns about the policies in the guidebook and how they will be applied in the local area plan. These concerns can be and should be addressed in each of the local area plans for those specific communities. This allows communities to customize the policies and urban form categories as needed to address the local, unique needs of each community. These building blocks created in the guidebook are designed to be flexible when creating a local area plan. This again has been done where local plans varied or added policies to the new community planning guidebook as needed for their local context. Things such as changing guidebook policies about how neighbor activity centers are designed, the areas of community boundaries, or creating new urban form categories that weren't included in the guidebook previously, such as industrial transition areas, corridor planning areas, and joint planning sites. In conclusion, the guidebook is integral to restore development certainty to the communities, encourage economic and investment, and reduce costs to the city. It does this by giving communities the building blocks to create their own local area plan and create complete communities that respect the local community context. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McLean, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Ian Cartwright. Are you there, Ian? Hello, Ian. Okay, we'll come back to you. Elizabeth McDermott, are you there? Elizabeth McDermott? No? Okay, so are there any questions for the first three speakers on this panel? And I see, yes, Councillor Davison has a question, and I also want to acknowledge that Councillor Demong has been on the list, has joined us as well. Sorry, Councillor Davison.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, my question would be for Mr. Dinning. First of all, thank you for your words today, and thank you for your many years of service. I guess the question I would ask you from your experience is, if we were to go out and look at re-engagement on this, what would that look like to you? How could we achieve success with engagement on this?
Well, thank you, Councillor Davison. Good question. Fortunately, I don't have to do it anymore. I used to, and it's one thing to go out with a preconceived notion of what success looks like. But I've often said the ability to change your mind shows that you have one. And I'd simply ask the planning department, who speaks in language that is foreign to most Calgarians, to come out and talk straight. The planning is, and I'm not a planner, but the planning is that we often will hear is mind-numbing. And it's fraught with cliches and, as I said, spa-like tranquility that doesn't reflect the reality of what each of us live on the streets or our cul-de-sacs or where our kids play hockey or where we have a beer around a fire out our front door. And that kind of reality is often missing in decisions that I see made by the planning department. And I think they can, and I'd ask councillors to tell them to up their game, period.
Very, very good answer. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thanks again, Mr. Dinning, for being here.
Sorry, Councillor Davison. Councillor Carra.
Yeah, I can't sit here and not ask Mr. Dinning a question myself. Mr. Dinning, you've been hammering away at the lack of reality regarding the plans before us and no apparent reason for doing this work. I'm going to put that all by the side. My question for you is, are the neighborhoods that you have referenced, Elbow Park and Mount Royal and Meadowlark Park, the reality for the majority of Calgarians? Is that your assertion? Because that certainly seems to be what you're talking about here.
No, sir, it's not. It is for the residents of those communities. It is their reality.
Yeah, I totally understand that. But what this guidebook does, sir, is establishes what the base reality for the general city should be and creates all kinds of ample opportunities for exceptional circumstances. And I guess I'm having a hard time understanding your advocacy for, an exceptional circumstance as a base condition for building the city. And that's just, am I misunderstanding you, sir?
Well, I hope not, sir. I thought I spoke rather plainly. I just don't think that the guidebook addresses the concerns of the communities that I'm familiar with. And I don't purport to speak for the city or for other wards or other communities. I'm speaking from my own experience.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Ms. Coppus, Mr. Dinning, and Mr. McLean for coming forward in this panel. We're now going to move to the next panel, and Mayor Nenshi will be back shortly. But this panel is Kernahan. Sorry, I got to get my notes here. Pardon me. Cam Kernahan, Edward Spink, Toun, Osuntogun, pardon me, Peter Collins, and Susan Rowskey. So let's start off with Cam Kernahan. Welcome.
Great. Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you. My name is Cam Kernahan. By way of introduction, I'm a native Calgarian who's lived in the city for over 60 years. Excuse me. I've lived in a variety of housing options in various communities, including duplexes, row housing, apartments, and single-family homes. I've been able to live in districts in the southwest, northwest, and inner city. I remember looking at various things when we were considering what communities to live in. Our decision was primarily informed by the character of the communities we were looking at and how that fit our lifestyle at that stage in our lives. We were comforted by the fact that we could understand what a community would be like in the future based on the current nature of the community.
Great. Thanks very much.
We didn't object to living in a community that has certain aspects like high-density housing options.
Pardon me.
Yes.
Pardon me, Cam. Could everyone please mute their phones on the bridge? Thank you very much. Please proceed, Cam.
Thank you.
No, there's still feedback. Please mute. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Cam. I'll add this to your time.
Okay, thank you very much. We didn't object to living in a community that had certain aspects like high-density housing options, but we also wanted a choice in communities that offered only single-family homes. Based on that fact, I felt it was important to better understand the potential impact of the guidebook on our community. I attended community meetings, one of which had over 120 participants, and a Guidebook 101 session conducted by city employees. I was struck by two things from these meetings. One was the passion and commitment of the city staff, along with the rationale and significant work that has gone into the Guidebook. The other was the significant and almost universal opposition to the guidebooks by all the attendees. There seemed to be a disconnect based on the amount of work that had gone into the guidebook and its acceptance by the citizens participating in these discussions. It seemed to me that the opposition was a result of unclear expectations of what sort of developments would be allowed in specific communities. Without this clarity, human nature conjures up the most negative scenarios, including a large multifamily dwelling springing up in the middle of a single-family homes area, significantly impacting the current character of the community. It was interesting to hear the city planners suggest that some communities would not be subject to higher density housing, that single-family homes would be valued and preserved, and that those higher density housing choices would never be arbitrarily allowed in the middle of existing communities. It struck me that if the guidebook more specifically stated some of those restrictions that would protect the character of communities, it would get broader acceptance. It's also struck me that if the local area plans are more accurately reflected by local areas, i.e. the specific communities that currently exist versus the multiple communities proposed, again, the guidebook would be more broadly accepted. Although I recognize that having local area plans for each specific community would create more work for the city, I believe it would more accurately represent how citizens in that community would like to see their community developed and alleviate some of the concerns about lack of input to develop plans in a much larger area. In the Guidebook 101 meeting, the planners referred to multiple times to the Beltline area and the significant development changes that occurred since 1960, suggesting the Guidebook was required to better manage that growth. What was missing for me was a reference to some of the specific communities and how their character, which defines those communities, have remained relatively unchanged since their inception. In the case of Elbow Park, the character of that community hasn't changed much since 1910 by maintaining the look and feel of the community with its heritage homes and mature streetscapes. I respect that the city needs the guidebook to manage its growth and that there has been a lot of good work done but would encourage Council to send the guidebook back for amendments that better outline the nature of the proposed housing choices, where and how they would be allowed, and how the character of specific communities would be maintained, perhaps by creating local area plans on a per-specific community basis with strong community input. I appreciate the opportunity to express my concerns to Council and hope that you will do something that creates better clarity to citizens in specific communities on how their communities will or will not be affected by the guidebook going forward. In my over 60 years in Calgary, there have only been a few issues that have generated as much community interest as this proposed guidebook. I hope you will listen to the constituents and do what they would like in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kernahan. We are absolutely taking heed and listening hard. I want to acknowledge that Councillor Chahal is also part of Council's listening as well. So with that, Edward Spink, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Please
Hello?
begin.
Great. Thank you.
Please begin.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Deputy Mayor and members of Council. My name is Edward Spink, and I'm an urban planner with the Federation of Calgary Communities. I'm joined by my colleague and fellow planner, Toun Osuntogun, who is listed after me on the panel, and we are doing a joint presentation speaking on behalf of the Federation. The Federation is a support organization for over 230 community-based nonprofit organizations, including 152 community associations. We assist community volunteers in navigating Calgary's planning process and advocate for a community perspective throughout our work. The Federation has been a stakeholder in this process since we were informed about the guidebook. We have participated in working group sessions, hosted informed sessions with the city, and have continued to update our members about the progress of the guidebook as we were updated. Since the January 13th PUD meeting, the Federation has continued to direct people to the city's guidebook sessions so they can learn more and form their own opinions. We also hosted 3 Federation town halls to understand our members' viewpoints about this version of the document. Today, we are here to present what we heard from our members, what they like about the updated guidebook, the gaps they have identified, and proposed solutions. Across our network, we heard that our members like that the guidebook introduces a comprehensive method to planning that streamlines the planning process, provides a holistic approach focused on creating complete communities, contains a suite of strong built-form policies that focus on quality urban design, such as active frontages and human-scale development, is inclusive of non-car modes of transportation, and uses language that is clear to understand and easier to read. Overall, there was an acknowledgement that the guidebook will help us to combat sprawl and create a more compact city. The common key gap we heard from our members is that the guidebook does not provide any opportunity for the ability to have areas of only single detached homes within each geographic community. The application of zones A and B is concerning to our members as it precludes the ability to have a more granular discussion about where pockets of only single detached housing could be maintained in their communities. The zones are confusing to interpret, and the criteria are such that there would be few areas where only the lowest intensity, low density residential forms are supported. This is where the feeling of uncertainty comes in for communities. Therefore, the Federation recommends that all references to zones A and B in Section 2.8 should be removed from the guidebook. In addition, the Federation is supportive of the amendment circulating from Councillor Gondek that proposes a single detached special policy area. This would enable an opportunity through the local area planning process for communities to identify areas that will be restricted for single detached dwellings. However, it is important that the zones are removed to make this proposed amendment possible and to give communities that choice. I will now pass it off to Toun for the rest of our presentation.
Thank you very much.
I'm just continuing the presentation. Okay. Our members were also concerned about infrastructure and amenities. The guidebook encourages amenities such as mobility infrastructure, streetscape improvements, community garden spaces, heritage resources, just to name a few. Communities who have seen intensification have not necessarily seen the investment in amenities or mobility infrastructure in their communities. As we continue to redevelop and build our inner city communities, it is important that communities receive certainty that not only will their amenities and public realm improvements be funded to support and match the population growth proposed, but that their services will improve as well. The guidebook outlines that appropriate tools will be developed to leverage funding against density. As communities densify, what is a guarantee that investment will happen or continue to happen, just like it did in the North Hill pilot program? Redevelopment can only be successful if there's significant investment from both public funding and private investment. Dedicated and proven ways to fund growth and change will build trust and offer certainty to communities. Finally, I'd like to talk about the engagement process moving forward. For more than 50 years, community associations in Calgary have had an established role in the planning process. As more communities go through the multi-community planning process, it is important to continue to enhance two-way engagement with community associations, other community-based groups, and residents. We recommend that Council direct administration to publish a clear engagement process for all planning projects going forward. This will set expectations about when to engage, the type of engagement that is needed, and what the outcome of the engagement will be. It is key that all stakeholders have a clear understanding of why engagement is needed and why the chosen type of engagement is being pursued. This is a critical piece in building trust across stakeholders. Finally, we encourage administration to continue with training and support for community volunteers to help with the interpretation and implementation of the guidebook. There are a lot of Calgarians that are unaware of the guidebook and how it will apply to their communities through the multi-community local planning process. The Federation appreciates being engaged as a stakeholder, and we hope that we have continued opportunities to provide meaningful input along our community membership. We thank administration for all the work they've done so far, and we thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you for your very efficient presentation. We're on now to Mr. Peter Collins. Are you there, Peter?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Indeed, we can. Please proceed.
My name is Peter Collins. I've lived and worked in Calgary for 39 years. I have several points to make about the guidebook. Its concept and purpose are not problematic. I'm all for process improvement, but parts of its content are deeply troubling to me. First, I'm opposed to the urban densification philosophy underlying the guidebook. Urban densification results in higher housing costs, lower rates of family formation, and the ultimate reduction in the viability and diversity of cities. This is well-documented fact. I refer you, for example, to the best-selling book, The Human City, Urbanism for the Rest of Us, by Joel Kotkin, and the many research papers it cites. Second, implementing the guidebook will reduce housing choice. The guidebook contemplates a variety of housing forms in every neighborhood. Inserting row housing and multi-story apartment buildings in existing single-family neighborhoods will destroy what is valued and attractive about those neighborhoods. The guidebook will also substantially restrict single-family housing supply in future neighborhoods. I have no issue with a variety of housing forms, but that variety should include single-family dwelling neighborhoods, and enough of such neighborhoods that they're an affordable housing choice for all who seek such neighborhoods. Look at Calgary today. The vast majority of Calgary households are voting with their money and their feet to live in single-family dwellings. The city should not restrict that option. Third, implementing the guidebook is unfair to the many Calgarians who have already invested and chosen to live in single-family dwelling neighborhoods. It's wrong for the city to now permit substantial changes in established neighborhoods against the will of those who live there. Fourth, existing neighborhoods were not developed to handle increased density. My neighborhood of Mayfair, in your redevelopment zone B, for example, has only one entrance, only one lane wide each way. There's already congestion at the entrance due to several retail businesses which the city unwisely permitted to locate there. Densification would only worsen traffic problems and parking congestion. Additionally, the utilities infrastructure in many established communities would require costly upgrades to accommodate densification. The guidebook density model just doesn't work for established communities. Fifth, the fabric of existing neighborhoods will erode over time, destroyed by density. And if new neighborhoods are not developed with sufficient single-family housing, then people will choose to live in bedroom communities outside Calgary, which provide the housing choice they want. Calgary should be allowed to evolve organically to meet the changing needs and desires of its residents, as those needs and desires are expressed by its residents over the coming decades. rather than in one preordained way by ideologically driven urban planners. Which leads me to my two final points. The Guidebook's focus on densification in existing communities is bad policy and has no place as part of Calgary's municipal development plan. The Guidebook's principle of ever-increasing densification will infuse each local area plan spawned under it. The Guidebook contemplates that almost every existing single-family home is subject to replacement with higher-density buildings. That's just wrong. The city can impose a local area plan on a community against its will, and likewise can approve developments in a community against the community's will. I'm concerned that ambitious developers, aided by willing city planners, will impose density-increasing developments against the will of the Calgarians who actually live in the affected communities. Finally, what the Guidebook advocates is a radical change in approach to Calgary's urban planning, which will have dramatic impact not only in future development, but also on existing communities. Despite this, there's not been an appropriately prominent communication campaign for the Guidebook. There have been no mail-outs to homeowners, no broad media information campaign, and little apparent attempt to inform and engage the public. It seems the city administration and council are trying to slip the Guidebook into law without appropriate publicity and debate, which is highly improper given its significance. The major changes proposed by the Guidebook should have an equally major public debate and approval process, whether by referendum or through extensive debate as part of the upcoming municipal election campaign. This radical and dramatic change in urban policy should be fully communicated and debated by Calgarians who could then vote on it. None of you was elected to implement the Guidebook. You don't have a mandate to make such a major change to Calgary. Doubly so for those of you not seeking re-election. The soon-to-be dead hands of the past have no right to bind Calgary's future. I want to believe that each of you values a strong democracy with substantial, vigorous debate about major policy matters, but approving the Guidebook now doesn't align with those values. I question the way in which this major change in urban planning policy is being... It disrespects Calgarians. Those are my comments.
Okay,
I'm done.
That's pretty good timing. Thank you.
Through the chair, and I wanted to wait for Mr. Collins to finish before I rose on a point of privilege. But
well, we have one. We have one more speaker
now. I'd like to rise on a point of privilege.
Thank you.
I think
this is Councillor Woolley that's speaking.
It's Councillor Woolley.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's very important, and I know not heads on the chamber, and it's a little bit harder to manage the debate, but we heard a significant amount of misinformation as far as I'm concerned in Mr. Collins' comments. And I had asked the mayor at the beginning of this, which is when we are hearing points that I know and believe to be significant amounts of misinformation, that we need to call that out as it happens. And Mr. Collins' tone was riddled with a ton of unbacked up facts based on.
Okay, so Councillor Woolley, at the end of this panel, if you can take note of all of these things that you at the end of this panel, Councillor Woolley, I will call on you to raise those issues, and you can get clarification with them if you wish, with administration.
I've written down a bunch, and I think at the back end of this, I will identify those. Okay,
at the end of this panel, I will recognize you. So with that, I'd like to move to the last speaker of this panel, panel 3, and that would be Susan Rowskey. Are you there, Susan?
Yes, I am, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Proceed. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Susan Rowskey, and I'm a member of the Elbow Park Residents Association. I've lived in many of Calgary's communities in various housing options. I began in Marlborough in the northeast, Thorncliffe in the northwest, Lake Bonavista in the southeast, but I've lived for the past 31 and a half years in Elbow Park. The community of Elbow Park was then and remains today a diverse mix of residents. Professional couples, families with babies and young elementary-age children, teenagers, young adults with their families, newly minted empty nesters, but most importantly, there are seniors determined to age in this community they are familiar with and from which they are supported. We enjoy 3 parks with rinks and hockey and basketball, all used by communities throughout the city of Calgary. As the guidebook outlines, a community represents homes, green space, heritage, unique attributes, but mostly it represents residents who are passionate about where they live. There's no magical prescription or recipe that can craft a perfect community. It's not something that can be assembled by numbers or algorithms or percentages. Communities are constantly evolving, we've heard that today, and adapting to change at varying rates. A community cannot be designed with a standard vanilla format attributable to all communities. There are 40 communities today working together in support of one another, interacting and sharing information so that we can begin to understand and clarify what the guidebook is proposing in its current format. Not since 1980 has City Council witnessed this many communities coming together to raise their concerns about the passing of a bylaw. Why the urgency? It's not because it's taken 12 years to come to its forefront. We've already heard the guidebook is intended to be a dynamic living document. Why is there so much misunderstanding? Urgency creates mistrust, and trust can easily be achieved with transparency and working together in collaboration. And it is mandatory that all communities impacted in the short term can understand and articulate the objectives of this guidebook. We must be able to clear away the misunderstandings, overcome any potential hurdles, and resolve the issues before this bylaw is passed. And at this moment, there are too many unknowns. Collaboration is the key to success, and it must include all stakeholders, including the elected councillors whose communities are affected. Calgary remains in a fragile position economically. 12 months of pandemic have negatively impacted us further. We need to plan our next steps and be sure to do this right. This is not an urgent issue facing Calgarians tonight. Most Calgarians would suggest employment is our number one priority. We realize 11% unemployment. We lost an additional 12,000 positions recently, and 60,000 citizens left this province last year. The downturn in 2015 has devastated our economy. And yet many young people remain optimistic. They represent the future of our great city. They hold steadfast with optimism that they will participate in the recovery of this economy. And much of this enthusiasm is attributable to the hard work of City Council to diversify by inviting in new digital technology industries outside of oil and gas. So why is there no similar innovative thinking to the planning? Why has there been no consideration by city planning to developing and leveraging existing infrastructure? Our downtown core is dead, filled with empty office towers. Where's the innovation to revitalize our city core? Why are we not innovating to leveraging that existing infrastructure? It comes with available parking, it comes with road infrastructure, it comes with public transportation. Why are we not focusing this guidebook to build a new, vibrant community in the downtown core? Investments will bring businesses, stores, restaurants, grocery stores, salons, medical offices, and a diversified group of residents wanting to capitalize on this new area. There's cycling paths, walking paths, and the beauty of the Bow River. Sure, we'll need schools, but we've got buildings that could be converted to schools. Let's attract these investors to build and revitalize the existing infrastructure and realize a vibrant downtown core. I don't believe the engagement process discussed today represents a valid representation of...
Susan, it's time to wind up, so please wind up. Thank you.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you. For myself, the guidebook is not a clear and concise document. It raises many questions. And if it was clear and concise, then Council would not have 40 community associations requesting that their elected representatives step down from voting to support passing this bylaw tonight.
Thank you very much, Susan, for coming forward today. Now, that concludes panel 3. And I said I would recognize Councillor Woolley at the end of the panel to address some of the concerns he had as to how factual some of the statements were with administration. But before I do that, Councillor Farkas, are your questions for any of the panel members? Councillor Farkas.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm quite concerned about the reputational risks of councillors accusing citizens of misinformation without proof.
Okay.
That's not really the purpose of...
Yeah, okay, so any questions for this panel, though? I'll recognize you for those statements in a minute.
Great. Perhaps just for Mr. Collins, I really appreciated the correspondence that you sent into our office as well as the enclosed book. Thank you for the great read. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Farkas. Your Worship, welcome back. To catch you up, on panel 2, Ian Cartwright and Elizabeth McDermott were not present. So you might make note of that because maybe we need to catch up with them later.
Okay, will do.
We've concluded panel 3, and on a point of procedure or privilege, I guess it would be, Councillor Woolley has a number of issues that he wants to raise with administration that he feels are inaccurate information. So over to you.
All right, Councillor Woolley, I'm going to give you a little bit of rope on this. The right time for this redirection is at the end of the public hearing, but because I didn't hear what was said, I'll give you a bit of rope to have a bit of a conversation here, but I might cut you off and ask you to come back at the end of the public hearing, but go ahead.
And that's fine, Your Worship. I guess when I hear things like City Hall shoving things down people's throats, and the general tone of Mr. Collins's comments were something that I do take as a point of privilege. This process is not unfraught and it is not uncomplex. But I will follow up on the tape and I will follow up with questions. I guess I do have one question for Mr. Collins. Sorry, not Mr. Ross. Are you on the line, Mr. Collins?
I'm here.
Yeah, thank you. You raised a number of thoughts that basically Mayfair doesn't have the capacity, that the pipes can't serve it, that basically this density is incompatible with the community. And I just wanted to ask you one question. Do you know what the population of your community is today?
I know that it's 327 households. I don't know the exact population count within each house.
In our latest stats, the numbers do matter for the way that we look at where we're planning investments and infrastructure, all sorts of things. And the population of Mayfair today is 432 people. And that population is just under 50% less people living in Mayfair today than were living in Mayfair in 1968. Were you aware of that?
Doesn't surprise me.
So Mayfair, I think Mayfair is in the top neighborhood that's seen its population, and at about half the population, we call that a population collapse. Mayfair's population has completely collapsed. How do you think we can get that population up to the bustling numbers that it was in 1968? How do you think we should endeavor to do that?
Well, I think it's happening naturally and organically. A lot of the original homeowners, this neighborhood was built in the late 50s. A lot of the original homeowners are well retired. Our next door neighbor, for example, moved into a nursing home a few years ago. A nice new couple bought the house, rebuilt it. They have 2 young children. 3 doors west of us, an old retired gentleman sold. The house was replaced with a new house with a new young family. There are lots of young families happening. This is natural turnover in the community. So I dispute the assertion that there is a population collapse. I would suggest it's a generational replacement which is happening.
Well, we actually know that given the size of families these days, sir, that population will never recover to its population number 50 years ago. And so I guess, with 20 schools up for closure in inner city and established neighborhoods, what do we do to ensure that those schools can remain populated?
Well, there's a school right across the back alley. It's fully utilized. It's a public school. It's a charter school, the Calgary Girls School. I'm really not concerned about this notion that there's population collapse. All families across Canada, the United States, Western Europe are smaller than they were a generation or two ago. That is an ongoing change. It doesn't change the fact that people want to live in single-family neighborhoods.
I don't disagree with you, sir. That's all the questions I have, Your Worship.
Thanks very much. Councillor Carra, please. Excuse me, not Carra. Councillor Farkas, please.
Yeah, I would just say as city councillors, there's an inequality in power here. I would just urge my colleagues, if we can, to be careful in our accusations of misinformation. Just because a citizen may disagree with you or come to a different conclusion on ambiguous legislation, it doesn't mean that they are spreading misinformation. So I would just say that we need to be very cautious here and be very specific if there's a claim that we're looking to respond to. Because once those allegations are out there, these citizens are really powerless in terms of being able to respond. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Farkas. All right, let's go to the next panel now. Do we have Ian Cartwright or Elizabeth McDermott on the line? Okay, hearing none, I'll move them to the end of the list and ask at the end. But in the next panel, do we have Rachel Timmenmans?
Yes, hello.
Great, just go back on mute for a second. Do we have Monique Beaumont?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, just go back on mute for a second. Stuart Craig? Stuart? Okay, do we have Heather Heasman?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And do we have Rhonda Fulton? Okay, I'm just going to pull into the next panel here. Do we have Allan Legge? Okay, do we have Jennifer Strain? How about Pat Guillemaud? Are you there, Pat?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'll put you in this panel that's coming up now, if that's okay.
Oh, that's fine.
Do we have Jeanne Kimber?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, who's that? I heard a male voice say I'm here, but I don't know who it was.
Sorry?
I just heard someone say I'm here, can you hear me, but I don't know who it was. Who was that?
Hello?
Hi.
Hello, this is Stuart Craig. I'm sorry for technicalities.
Stuart Craig? All right, great. So we'll start there. So we'll go Rachel.
Sorry, I finally got my phone unmuted. It's Jeanne Kimber, and I am here.
Okay, Jeanne, great. We'll add you to the end of this panel. So we'll go Rachel Timmenmans, Monique Beaumont, Stuart Craig, Heather Heasman, Pat Guillemaud, and Jeanne Kimber. Okay? So we'll go to Ms. Timmenmans. Ms. Timmenmans first. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the time to speak this evening in support of the Guidebook. I've lived in Calgary all my life. I was born in the Rocky View Hospital. I grew up in Erin Woods, and now I study at Mount Royal University. This city, and more importantly, Calgarians, have helped raise me and shape me into who I am today.
Rachel Timmenmans,
the people.
Monique Beaumont, Stuart
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me, Ms. Timmenmans. We just
need
feedback. Yeah, someone is not muted who's listening to the webcast. So everybody look at your device and make sure it's muted. There we go. Go ahead, Ms. Timmenmans.
Thank you. So this city, and more importantly, Calgarians, have helped raise me and shape me into who I am today. And the people and decisions being made around me have had an incredible impact on my growth and the path that my life is currently on. And having lived in Calgary for the past 24 years, I can safely say that the inverse is less than true. While Calgary has had an impact on me and who I am, it seems like only a certain group of Calgarians are given the opportunity to have an impact on the growth or trajectory of our city. And this is why I'm so excited to see the Guidebook brought to Council today. The Guidebook is, in my opinion, a big first step into making Calgary a city that is designed for and by all of its people. Some of the reasons I'm looking forward to the guidebook is the potential to fill Calgary's middle housing gap in many of its communities, the potential flexibility that we can bring to the land use bylaw, and I'm very excited that we're finally going to start planning and laying the groundwork for great communities instead of building some houses on the edge of the city and hoping a sense of community comes with it. As a young person, I want to live in a densely populated community with mixed-use housing. I don't want to own a car. I want to live in a walkable neighborhood with where I can use a bike or, utilize public transit as much as I can. I want to be surrounded by independent businesses and grocery stores, even if that means they cost a little bit more. Because to me, these are the things that make a great community, and these are what I think of when I imagine being part of the energy of Calgary. It's been interesting hearing the comments today in opposition of the guidebook, specifically those who have said, what about the people who already live in these communities? What about the people who are already here? And to those people, I say, what about people like me? What about the young people in Calgary who might not own houses yet, but they want to have a say in the communities that they are going to live in? I love Calgary. It is my home, and I do not want to leave. But I don't want to be forced to live in a city that was built with one kind of person in mind and one kind of family in mind. I don't want to live in a city where I don't see a future for myself. But with the introduction of the guidebook, I am looking forward to living in a city that doesn't feel like it's fighting against its future. I'm looking forward to living in a city where no matter who you are, where you are from, or where you are headed, it is a place that you feel empowered to become part of the energy, where you have the resources and support available to you, no matter what barrier you are fighting to overcome or what dream you are working to achieve. And that is why I am super proud to be here to speak in support of the Guidebook for Greater Communities, because you cannot build a sustainably great city without first building great communities. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Timmenmans. Let's go to Ms. Beaumont, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Nenshi and councillors. My name is Monique Beaumont, and I'm a resident of Rideau Roxborough. I'm here to request that the Guidebook for Great Communities be referred back to the City Administration so as to allow time for further community engagement and possible amendments. As a lifelong Calgarian and a long-time homeowner, I care very much about this city and its future. I am aware of the housing issues that arise in cities as they grow and change, and I would like to state up front that I am in favor of finding creative ways to increase housing in the inner city. Laneway houses seem to me to be one very good example of sensitive densification. Because I sit on our community association board, about a month ago I was contacted by a concerned neighbor who asked me about the Guidebook. Although our president had mentioned the Guidebook at one of our meetings, I knew almost nothing about it. I should have, because I am actually one of two neighborhood representatives who is supposed to be participating in the development of our local area plan. But in March of 2020, our community association president was looking for two people from our neighborhood to join the West Elbow Communities Working Group to create something called an LAP. I had absolutely no idea what an LAP was or what the city was working on, but I am interested in development issues, and so I volunteered, assuming that it was early days and that I would surely be brought up to speed so that our community could have some meaningful input. Almost as soon as the city accepted my application to join in on this process, I was informed that the public engagement sessions were to be put on hold indefinitely due to COVID. I let our community president know, and I waited for more information from the city. That information never came. Since being schooled by my neighbor, I have read the Guidebook to Great Communities several times, and I find it confusing. Not because it is too technical, but because the language used throughout seems deceptive and somewhat cagey. What does come through clearly is that communities will have no real say in their future development. LAPs are expected to, and I quote the book here, build upon the policies in the Guidebook, or achieve the policies provided in the guidebook or to meet the intent of the principles and goals of the guidebook. An LAP, it says, can only help to guide or propose a concept or convey a vision. So what the guidebook really says is that community members and their LAPs will have no real say in how our neighborhoods will densify, only that they will densify in ways and places that planners, bureaucrats, and developers have deemed appropriate and outlined for us in the Great Book. There are many informed and concerned people online tonight, and they will speak to the nuts and bolts of the guidebook better than I can. But I am here to say that from the perspective of a regular Calgarian with no in-depth knowledge of planning processes or zoning bylaws, I don't believe that my community was ever adequately informed or consulted during this process. I have heard from the city representatives tonight that many information sessions were held and years of meaningful community input has been sought, but I haven't seen or heard one bit of it. I question the necessity of approving this guidebook in its current form when it is so obviously lacking in support from the people who actually own the homes in the inner city neighborhoods affected by these changes. Please, councillors, listen to us. No two communities are exactly alike. We are not anti-development. We are not NIMBYs who don't understand the need for cities to change. We are homeowners and community members who also have valid, inclusive, and thoughtful ideas on how best to create and protect our great communities. The numbers of speakers here with questions and concerns should be proof enough that the city needs to do more work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beaumont, for that. There were some interesting things you raised that I'm going to follow up with administration on as someone who is meant to be working on this stuff. Let's go to Mr. Craig, please. Are you there? Mr. Craig, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great. Go ahead. We've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Good evening. Welcome back, Your Worship, and good evening, councillors. I'll state from the outset that I'm certainly not in disagreement in principle with the concept of the guidebook, but what I'm critically concerned with is the manner in which it's being developed, it's being executed, and the direction it's about to go in. As a retired consultant who's worked on many large and indeed global scale projects, some great, others bad, the lessons invariably come down to, amongst other things, the need for strong and capable project management team members, effective sponsorship, comprehensive stakeholder engagement, and we'll get to that, clear assumptions, accuracy of inputs, solid planning, and stage gate reviews, approvals throughout any project's life cycle. What I've evaluated, based on what's been made available to me, is a set of policy statements in a guidebook that is such an oversimplification and generic approach to a vision of a future city as to render the document in its present form of little or no purpose. My key concerns come down to the fact that there's no visible and articulated process and workflow, hence the skepticism over how this grandiose vision of council will unfold. From the municipal development plan, progressing into the guidebook, through to the establishment of local area plans. What I find interesting is the speak of the 4 C's of culture for the city of Calgary, at least competence and collaboration, I view as platitudes as it concerns the guidebook. I posed to the Guidebook 101 presentation team on the February 17th presentation a number of questions relating to these underlying words, requests which I thought were straightforward and reasonable, to which replies only came back in the form of generalities, so that all constituents of the city can understand the process and assumed diligence that council has taken throughout the life cycle of this project thus far. I'd request that all supporting documents, minutes, records, particularly of engagement and council review sessions, be made available to the public for review before council attempts to enact the guidebook into bylaw. There should be no reason why you can't provide public access to these specific documents. To not reveal these and to pass policy and the guidebook into bylaw can leave no conclusion other than doubt over process, doubt over practices, and most importantly, that many concerned voices have fallen on deaf ears. There are just too many generalities and vague explanations in this iteration of the guidebook. It creates an unclear future for me. I'm deeply concerned, as will likely prove for the majority of Calgarians over the coming years, that this guidebook project will only lead to vast derision, needless expended tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and see the city no further ahead than it is today. Our city is in a struggle to reinvent its economy and seek basic stability. The guidebook, in my estimation, as many others have voiced tonight, should not be of immediate concern, nor should there be a rush to push through policy and bylaw with so much uncertainty remaining. I employ you as mayor and city council to cease the reading of this guidebook in bylaw until, one, full transparency has been achieved and proper engagement of stakeholders, i.e. residents, business owners, and educational facilities across each and every, and I specify every community, has been completed. Certainly within our community, these preconditions have been absent. I'm concerned, sadly, as are hundreds of thousands of other Calgarians, that the vagueness of this book is such that this provides dangerous inroads for developers and others, much like vultures circling, to take advantage of a situation at the expense of residents, local businesses, and educational facilities. Again, it comes back to transparency of process and clarity of appeal process. I feel very uncomfortable with the loose or yet to be defined approach. To otherwise pass this guidebook into bylaw would perpetuate the perception, if not a reality, unfortunately, that council is simply not interested in listening to the very constituents that they are meant to serve and who elected them in the trust that their interest would be judiciously represented. I've said my piece, and I hope that my words, those of others who have spoken and will speak to tonight and tomorrow in the myriad of letters undoubtedly received by the city clerk, and you as council give pause on this guidebook. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Mr. Craig. Thanks for being here. Let's go to Heather Heasman, please. Are you there?
Yes, Your Worship, I'm here.
You've got 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Heather Heasman. I'm a resident of Roxborough, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the Guidebook for Great Communities today. I extend special thanks to Councillors Farkas, Chu, Gondek, and Kara for your prompt and personal responses to the letter I submitted, and thank you for providing links to further information. I am opposed to the Guidebook in its current form. The Guidebook in its current form does not allow for communities to designate areas within the community as restricted RC1 zones in the local area planning process. There is no opportunity for communities to choose this as an option, as far as I can tell. I hear the message that the Guidebook is a living document and that changes as area plans are developed can be made. However, that seems like creation of extra work to me. I hear that some communities are at least 10 years out before their local area plans are completed. So what's the rush to vote on the Guidebook in its current form before the pilot local area plans have been completed and potential amendments are better informed by real, practical experience in the process with the Guidebook? With respect, I do not agree with an earlier comment this evening that holding off on approving the Guidebook this week signals that Calgary is closed for business. And you know what, I would actually like to comment, Ms. Timmenmans at the top of our panel. I'd like to thank you for your voice, for your young voice in this process. And also, I think it was Ms. Gillis of the Calgary Students Alliance in panel 1. I'd like to thank you for your voice too. And I hear what you want, and this city needs your energy. I have to caution, I do not think, however, the Guidebook is going to give you that energy, that vibrance, that ability to live in the communities that you want to live in. Thank you to the administration, members of council, and community members for your hard work on the Guidebook over the past 5 years. I can hear the emotion in your voices. I empathize and I understand why you're ready to move the Guidebook to the next step. I ask you to please remember that the best parts of significant policy change happen not at the beginning or middle, but right before the finish line. Please do not be critical of people reaching out to you with quote-unquote misinformation. That misinformation is the reality of those people's perspectives. Slowing it down and engaging through that misinformation, exasperation, anger, or fear, and that is what I've been hearing all day about this today, is the best kind of engagement. Please embrace this part of the process, even if it means you have to delay a bit longer. I ask you to please return the guidebook to City Administration until the granularity around the local area planning process, its triggers, and options available to communities is clear, or work through the completion of the pilot area plans so that there is a greater community understanding of how these two statutory planning documents work together. Thus, recommended amendments could be more reflective of actual community need. If that doesn't happen, per the Area 2 planning presentation material, please revisit the grouping of communities in that local area planning group so that those communities in the floodplain are grouped together. Clearly, density and development in the floodplain will have unique consideration to those communities that do not experience those specific challenges. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much for being here with us. Let's go now to Pat Guillemaud. Are you there, Pat?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you have 5 minutes, and I'll just remind everyone else, if you're not Pat, your phone should be on mute. All right, go ahead, Pat.
Okay, my name's Pat Guillemaud, and I'm a director of Westgate Community Association and speaking on behalf of my community. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the guidebook. The proposed guidebook has some good points and some concerning points. The process to get here has been interesting. The community of Westgate has been included in Zone B. We are a hidden gem bordered on 3 sides by major roads. Our main access and exit is from 45th Street. We are not a cut-through community. We have a mix of housing, predominantly single-family, new 2-story builds, and affordable housing through secondary suites. We have duplexes, a 120-unit co-op housing complex, 2 condo developments, a small rental apartment, and a secure facility. There are great benefits to having older established communities. These are places where kids can and still do play street hockey, learn to ride their bikes in their own community, families go for evening walks, chat to their neighbors, where snow angels and snow clearing is active. Young families and old intermingle for the benefit of all. Engagement for the guidebook seems to have been limited to a select audience. Participating in the March the 16th online session with the city, when asked about the engagement that was done, the answer was the engagement was not done as they were not getting the answers they wanted. Perhaps if communities were involved, they may have been able to reach a consensus. With all the changes that have happened in the guidebook, it is difficult for community associations run by volunteers to be able to keep up. This is a document created by professional planners in a league with developers without much input on the final version from the people that it will impact. The city is asking communities to trust that they have the best interest of communities. However, we do need time to review the documents and the implications. We wonder, is there a quota for what is to be built in each established community? The guidebook contains far too many should and may. That wording plays into developers wanting to develop our established communities. The example on page 8 of David and Maria's journey. When discussing the journey taken during the day, I'm not sure that same journey would occur when the temperatures are freezing, streets covered in ice and snow, and someone carrying loads of groceries or shopping with them. It's just not possible. Replacing single-family homes with infills is not affordable housing. The statement made again on the online session that people should be able to live where they want to, not where they can afford. As an example, in Marteloup, infills cost approximately $1 million. Families tend to avoid infills as there are no backyards. Many people purchase their home to be able to age in place. Bungalows allow this. Why does the community need to change when we age? Our community is a mixture of senior citizens with young families and kids next door, all live in close proximity with no concerns. On page 21, it states we need to ensure a variety of housing options are available for people of all ages, incomes, and lifestyles throughout our communities. The examples proposed are not affordable to everyone. Calgary has a variety of communities. People make choices as to the locations for a home purchase for many reasons: work, school, transportation, etc. And on page 25, the definitions must be to the satisfaction of the city, and alternatives must be to the satisfaction of the city. Also on this page, section K, applicants are strongly encouraged to conduct community outreach. Perhaps this should read must conduct community outreach. Then urban urban form categories and scale modifiers. In anticipation, we have catalogued all the new two-story builds within our community. We are concerned about what could be developed with the guidebook. Another concern, what is a low-activity street? We understand this is a residential street, therefore no density would occur. High-activity street plan for density. We are wondering who decides which street is what. Construction of a 4 to 6 story buildings backing onto single-family homes has a negative impact and affects the quality of lifestyle for the adjoining residents. We have found that families prefer to live in RC1 established neighborhoods. After speaking to many realtors, they confirm to us that families want established neighborhoods with single-family homes. The assumption that front driveways lead to pedestrian accidents is again misleading. Our community has front driveways. We cannot recall any negative interaction. The guidebook refers to low-density residential forms of housing that include different intensities from lowest to moderate to higher density, with the lowest density being the RC1L, RC1, RC1N. These allow for family homes and secondary backyard suites. Then the modest density refers to the same but added RC2. Perhaps they should all be considered lowest density. Then the higher density refers to those same designations but adds RCG for row housing and cottage housing cluster. The latter, RCG, needs to be in a separate classification away from the RC1L, RC1, RC1N, and RC2. A concern raised by Community Board is the guidebook infographics that states 100% community associations were reached. Westgate was not one. The Westbrook LAP has not met for approximately a year. It should be noted that Westgate is listed as one of the 30 communities that are currently working with the guidebook through local area plans. Where am I here? Okay. We appear to have not been consulted, and so I have been asked why is Westgate's name included in there. Referring to the document as the Guidebook for Great Communities is really leading to the destruction of established communities. To consider older established communities as ripe for redevelopment is so wrong. Our communities are not decaying and rotting away. They are vibrant, active places with mature vegetation, new homes, renovated and upgraded homes, active community associations. Sustainable development within established communities where each development is reviewed and based on the merits of the proposal, rather than blanking entire communities for the benefit of developers to increase density. Density in the appropriate locations and not ad hoc anywhere a developer can amass property. With so many questions and the lack of community consultation, we are asking that the guidebook be put on hold until all the necessary amendments that have been asked for are worked through. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Guillemot. We'll go to Jeanne Kimber, please, and that'll end this panel. Ms. Kimber, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we sure can. Please go ahead.
Very good. Your Worship and Council members, my name is Jeanne Kimber. I've lived in Highland Park since 1985, and I'm the current president of the Community Association. I have been involved in guidebook engagement the past 1.5 to 2 years. As stated in my letter to Council, our community supports the guidebook. It has been developed in tandem with the North Hill Community's local area plan. These two documents have been developed through a reciprocal and iterative process over the past several years. The guidebook sets out a framework for the creation of future local area plans. It establishes categories and category modifiers that can be applied and described throughout the city in a consistent manner. That framework is comprehensible, clearly differentiating broad conceptual categories that are already familiar to us, such as residential, commercial, and industrial areas. The guidebook only applies to an area when a new local area plan is being developed. It does not change any existing zoning, contrary to what some recent media would have us believe. I understand the anxiety that somehow the guidebook sets the stage for precipitous and unwanted change in a community. But change is very much market-driven. Highland Park, with its 1950s housing stock of bungalows, is a prime market for redevelopment opportunities. Demolishing my small post-war bungalow and building a modern semi-detached is more economically viable than it would be in communities where the selling price of a home far exceeds the market value of my home. And to be honest, the redevelopment of Highland Park staves off the general deterioration that was starting to occur some 20 or so years ago. Our community has been reinvigorated with new young families moving in, which also helps keep the public school open. To reject the guidebook is to toss out the window the past few years of time and effort expended by local volunteer residents, community associations, and members of the business community who all provided input to the city staff. The guidebook is not absolutely perfect. We understand that. There will be improvements made over time. We do want to see a clearly defined refresh cycle, and we agree with others that the land use bylaw needs to be reviewed, revised, and tied to the guidebook's urban form categories. I also believe that communities need to have some flexibility about which land uses might be tied to which UFCs when they are developing their own new local area plan. This would help alleviate some of the current anxiety over the guidebook and what is perceived as a threat to existing community character. For instance, Councillor Gondek's proposed amendment, re-single detached housing, might help provide this flexibility and the surety that many residents are seeking. To reject the guidebook because it is not absolutely perfect is also to reject the North Hill Community's LAP, which has been developed in conjunction with the guidebook. Highland Park does not have an up-to-date ARP or LAP. Redevelopment has been happening on an ad hoc parcel-by-parcel basis. Our only development criteria has been the land use bylaw. Not even the infill development guidelines have been applicable to Highland Park. Over the past year, I've even been using the draft LAP as a guide when reviewing some local development applications. Like the guidebook, the LAP is not perfect. A letter from Dan Evans, a resident of Crescent Heights, which is in your agenda package, made some useful suggestions for improvements, including a specified time frame for updating the LAP. That is a recommendation that we strongly endorse. A few years ago, Council directed that an LAP be created for Highland Park. It was also directed that our LAP be a constituent part of the North Hill Community's LAP. We need the foundational guidebook to make our draft local area plan a reality. If the guidebook is not approved or is delayed for an indefinite period of time, then what happens to the Highland Park and its need for a local area plan? I would very much like to thank the city planning team involved with the guidebook for the respect and courtesy they extended to all who've participated in the guidebook's evolution, and I thank you for your consideration. And also my quick thanks to Councillor Sutherland for acknowledging my comments at PUD last month. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for your great service to the community. It's not always easy. I don't see any questions for this panel, so I will excuse this panel and we will craft a new panel here. I'll first ask if we have Rhonda Fulton. Allan Legge, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you're going to be first in this next panel. Just put yourself back on mute, please. Jennifer Strain.
Yes, I'm here.
Jennifer, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you'll be second in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Donald Darnell. Are you here? Donald? Okay. Tim Claughton, are you here? Mr. Claughton, are you here? Okay, I'm going to squeeze into the next panel here. Do we have Norval Horner?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you're going to be our third speaker in this panel. Donald Thompson. All right, do we have Kent Manning? All right, how about Martina Walsh?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. You'll be our fourth speaker in this panel. And Jessica Lajoie, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you'll be our final speaker in this panel. So one more time, we've got Allan Legge, Jennifer Strain, Norval Horner, Donald Thompson, Martina Walsh, and Jessica Lajoie. All right, so we'll start with Mr. Legge. If you're there, sir, you've got 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I feel I've read all of the documents over and over, and I feel that we're almost as a citizen and a homeowner in Hounsfield Heights, I feel almost like a leftover, something that's not really important. We don't need to be involved. I don't find that the guidebook for great communities, it's just too uncertain. There's too many shoulds, woulds, coulds, mights, mays. There's very few wills. The points that have been raised by, for example, Mr. Craig, Ms. Beaumont, and Mr. Dinning are right on the money. This is premature. This document is not ready. I also get the impression in listening to the councillors that there's too many that have made up their mind and have really not listened to the public. This is a public hearing, and we're having this at the virtually near the end. This guidebook has some good ideas. That's true. But the implementation and the uncertainties associated with it are just too great. For example, when you start talking about historical homes, there's also the concept of historical businesses, people that have been in business for 40 or 50 years, and the city is proposing to come in and put these businesses out of business? This makes no sense. It seems like there's more emphasis on shall we say, the tax uploading funding tool. It seems that there's more interest in increasing the tax base than interest in what the citizens think. I just find that we appear to be an afterthought. And I realize that a lot of work and time has been put into this, but I think it's time to step back because there's just too many concerns that have been raised about. There's just too much uncertainty. And I'm gonna leave it at that. But I am most disturbed with the whole process. I feel like you don't want to listen. You've already made up your minds. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I assure you that is not true, or we would not all be sitting here. But thank you for that. Jennifer Strain, please. Are you there, Ms. Strain?
Yes, I am. Thanks. Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jennifer Strain, and I live in the inner city community of Roxborough. I'm opposed to the passage of the guidebook today, and similarly believe it should be reconsidered to take into account all the concerns you've heard here today. I assume you have my written submission as well as a submission from our Rideau Roxborough Community Association, with which I agree. I'd just like to highlight a few points from those, but before I do, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our community. It is zoned RC1, and that was one of the key reasons my husband and I moved here 17 years ago with 3 small boys. It is a quiet oasis in the inner city. Traffic is light, and as a result, the streets are safe enough for hordes of kids to roam the neighborhood with their friends. Our local school is full. Finding parking is not a blood sport. The trees and pathways, playground parks, and skating rink attract people from all over the city. The houses here are a mix of small bungalows built in the 40s, refurbished older houses from the early 1900s, and historic homes, newer modern and traditional style houses. The people who live here tend to stay a long time, and they run the gamut from young families with kids, older families with young adults at home, to retirees, empty nesters, and single people from all walks of life. Around us are the neighborhoods of Mission, Earlton, Ramsey, Marteloup, South Calgary, the East Village, all of which already provide many, many options for higher density and mixed-use dwellings. I do not understand how designating my century-old neighborhood to be more like other neighborhoods contributes to greater diversity or preserves heritage. Nor do I understand the rush to approve this guidebook, particularly in the face of the concerns that have been expressed. Yes, as a city, we will need to adapt to changing demographics and economic circumstances. But currently, to my knowledge, the city is not in the midst of a housing availability crisis. I do not believe there has been meaningful consultation on the guidebook, and the fact that it has generated such conflicting views and opinions, I think, is reflective of that, notwithstanding the engagement the city says it has done. My understanding is that the guidebook is the master plan and that any subsequent local area plan will be required to be consistent with it. I understand these planning documents have the force of law. The guidebook says that Roxborough is in Zone A, which represents the greatest opportunities for residential infill development, and that in all areas of Zone A, higher density forms should be supported. And yet, on the other hand, the city says that zoning isn't changing and the land use bylaw isn't changing, at least not right away. Currently, we have the protection of the R1 designation and restrictive covenants on title. When my neighbor sells to a developer with plans to put row housing next to me, the ability to challenge it will be completely eroded by the fact that the municipal development plan, the guidebook, and the LAP not only allow but explicitly encourage that kind of development. So it is very misleading to say that zoning won't change, that the planning process won't change, and that the guidebook is just a recipe book. What we want are straightforward answers to serious questions that directly impact our quality of life and the investments in our homes. And it is frustrating that certain councillors seem dismissive to concerns from our communities, that single homeowners on 50-foot lots somehow don't warrant fair consideration. Finally, it is remarkable to me that the proposed guidebook fails to address or even acknowledge the single most calamitous event to hit many inner-city neighborhoods, and that is the flood of 2013. How can you have a planning document that doesn't address the unique challenges of development in flood-prone communities? How does densification of those communities make sense when there is, as yet, no substantive flood mitigation, when the province is still in the process of redoing flood hazard mapping, and while dozens of lots along the Elbow River that were bought by the province after the flood remain empty? Ought we not to have a more thoughtful review of these issues before steaming ahead to encourage densification in the flood zone? The guidebook should not be approved here today, as both the process that brought us to this point and the substance of the document itself warrants further consideration and discussion. I thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Strain. Let's go to Mr. Horner, please. Are you there? Mr. Horner?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you sound great. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Yes, Mayor Nenshi and council members and ladies and gentlemen, I am 45 years a homeowner in Scarborough, so I'm in Zone A in the guide. I have always been active in my community. I've been president. I've been in charge of traffic control, school retention, development aspects, and I've been our long-term historian. I live in a 108-year-old heritage home built of sandstone and brick, and I'm an active land developer in central Alberta. Now, I've been influenced because I lived in Dallas early in my career, and I watched a beautiful old neighborhood blockbusted systematically by developers who would acquire one home on an upzone block and proceed to build something that did not fit and move in people who did not fit. Then the houses on both sides went up for sale, and pretty soon the neighborhood was effectively destroyed. The new buildings that they were building were the same low-rise that you refer to in the limited intensity here, 3-story walk-ups, basically. Now, I've lived in the inner city for 45 years, some of my learnings. We are subject to a great many pressures, sometimes decaying homes, but our community is constantly renewing itself because our community has stayed strong. We're on at least our 3rd generational cycle, and our school is full. Now, the risk of inappropriate development is one of the things that weakens the desire of homeowners to maintain or invest in their property. They say to themselves, it's going to be torn down soon anyways. Uncertainty is a problem, and I see this guide creating uncertainty. Now, I believe a strong community association which defends and enhances the community is essential to maintain a strong inner-city community. And the whole city benefits from a strong inner-city communities for a variety of reasons. We're a key part of the city that gives people their first impressions of the city. It impacts their desire to live here or locate a business here. It maintains our tax base, and it maintains our heritage. I see the following problems with the guidebook. I think it's likely to lead to a loss of zoning protection. Now, you say it doesn't change zoning, and I see that. But I also see that our future local area plans will only have certain choices to make when it comes to neighborhood local. They talk about limited, but even limited is totally different than my community looks like today. It would involve 60% lot coverages. It would probably mean that 85% of our community could actually be row houses. It would mean the loss of a great much of our history. So I really think that it would be, and of course if you get to low intensity, now we've got 6-story buildings. It's an immense change. So the thing that it does is immediately lower the value of all our existing buildings. So why would we keep them up? And even heritage status does not seem to provide protection since the same densities and high lot coverages are allowed, and it encourages new builds to respect the heritage, but that is not the same as preservation. I see that changing zoning makes an area subject to blockbusting like I saw in Dallas. It's a great risk of inner cities, and it has caused the decline of many. And even passing the guidebook without changes will tend to be interpreted negatively by buyers and owners and can contribute to decline. Guidebook also appears to take away influence from pesky community associations and give more power to all-knowing planners who tend to be subject to pressures from the development community, and in my experience their decisions don't always make the most sense for communities. In summary, I urge you not to adopt the guidebook in the current form, as the intent appears to take away the current zoning on key inner-city communities, as I think you will do permanent damage to our city, not just the neighborhoods that you affect, but the whole city will suffer as a result. Also, I don't see the center of the city being the huge employment center that it used to be, so rezoning close-in heritage neighborhoods may not be necessary. I want to finish the story of Dallas, because I went back to Dallas in my career 30 years later, and I went to the community I used to live in, and it was basically gone. It was been replaced by 3-story walk-ups, and all those elegant old gardens and homes were gone. Now, Dallas has learned by their mistakes, because I see that as you go further east from where I lived, they are now protecting heritage communities, and it's a different kind of protection than is talked about in the guideline here. I guess I'm going to go back to somebody used the analogy of pizza toppings. You can just pick the pizza topping you want out of this guide. Well, when I look at page 77 and I see limited, low, mid, high as the allowable landforms, even limited doesn't give me what I think my community needs. Like so many other speakers tonight, I think we need another category that would allow retention of R1 buildings and heritage homes.
Okay, you're just at time, Mr. Horner, so I'll ask you to wrap up in a sentence if you could.
Well, I think I've said my piece. Scarborough is a healthy community. We're happy the way we are. I don't think we need densification, and I think it would be a major damage to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Let us go to Mr. Thompson, please. Donald Thompson, are you there? Mr. Thompson? You might be having some trouble unmuting yourself, Mr. Thompson. I'll give you another second, and if not, I'll go to the next person and we'll come back to you. All right, let's go to Martina Walsh, please.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Martina Walsh, and I reside and own property in a Zone A inner city neighborhood. Firstly, I do appreciate that the guidebook is an effort by the City Planning and Development to streamline and simplify development policies and procedures, and that this is what both citizens and developers have requested and deserve. But tonight I am speaking as a concerned Calgarian, asking you to vote against the approval of the current version of the guidebook. I feel this version is premature coming to Council for approval, as it was only released to the public the last week of January 2021 and contains substantial revisions to the previous guidebook of 2019. This guidebook revision lacks proper consultation with the community. There has not been time to engage with stakeholders in a transparent manner, to listen to concerns and to suggestions, and to respond to these and make revisions to the guidebook to reflect any needed amendments. With no time allowed to adequately consult with the public, this is a dangerous precedent that the city is setting. I do want to comment in response to Ms. Khan's comments regarding the Guidebook 101 workshop sessions as a method of engagement. I attended these sessions, which provided information on how to use the guidebook with the local area plan. We were given information, but we were not given the opportunity to comment on the guidebook or suggest improvements. I believe that the guidebook requires amendments to protect the current RC1 zoning of many inner city communities that have been designated as part of Zone A. The new modality of residential urban form category that I oppose is the neighborhood, local, limited scale residential form that may allow semi-detached, duplex, and row houses in areas that were previously designated as solely RC1, single detached housing. The assumptions made in the guidebook that my mature inner city community is ripe for redevelopment and densification due to the age of the community and decreasing population is actually in opposition to what is currently occurring in our area. My area, Elbow Park, is redeveloping, but the original homes are being replaced with appropriate single-family homes that are highly desired. They sell quickly to a variety of families of different ages, races, and compositions. Our community schools are filled to capacity, and I have concerns that the aging infrastructure of my area cannot properly sustain an increase in housing density. We are the vibrant and prosperous community that the guidebook is hoping to create. And this is due to our single detached lots, respect for the historical nature of our area, mature treed streetscapes, and community recreation sites. Our Residents Association is well supported and active in all facets of community life. Therefore, I respectfully suggest that the guidebook be amended. Firstly, I am going to suggest that the guidebook be amended to include a new urban form category under the neighborhood local limited scale, and it can be called conservation or historical inner city. It will maintain the current zoning of single detached RC1 in efforts to protect mature inner city communities from redevelopment that threatens our historical nature. I therefore do support the Alboya amendment that was previously stated. And secondly, the guidebook should be amended to remove the Zone A and B designations from page 47 on the guidebook from the limited scale residential intensity policies, thereby removing the assumption that these zones, A and B, present the greatest opportunities for infill development. In closing, I hope you will support me in respecting the history of Calgary's unique inner city communities and the right to have a choice in area, appropriate zoning, and the composition of the development of our communities. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ms. Walsh. Let's go to Jessica Lajoie, please. Jessica, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to this item tonight. My name is Jessica Lajoie, and I am a program specialist with the Alberta Eco Trust Foundation. I will start with a quick introduction to Alberta Eco Trust in case you aren't familiar with us. Alberta Eco Trust is a registered environmental charity with a 30-year history as a grant maker and capacity builder around environmental issues in Alberta. Our mandate focuses on water, land use, and climate change. We take a collaborative approach in our work and partner across sectors to mobilize and inspire those who champion and protect the environment for all Albertans. Alberta Eco Trust is also a member of the Low Carbon Cities Canada, or LC3 network, which consists of 7 large municipalities across Canada and is supported by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It is through our LC3 membership that we host the Climate Innovation Fund, a $40 million federal endowment to identify, invest in, and scale up climate change solutions in Calgary and Edmonton. In Calgary, we look to the Climate Resilience Strategy as guidance. Alberta Eco Trust supports the intent and general direction of the Guidebook for Great Communities. In particular, the mobility suggestions for pedestrian, cycling, and transit infrastructure are encouraging, as are the first steps towards incorporating climate change and sustainability goals. However, we need to increase the pace and scale of our efforts in order to meet the city's 2050 climate change goals. Excuse me. The topic I want to highlight is the importance of planning for renewable and district energy systems in our city. I would like to start by sharing a quote with you from Quest, a national group working with municipalities to accelerate the adoption of efficient and integrated community-scale energy systems. Quest recently released a protocol to help municipal staff and elected officials in this endeavor. It is from this protocol that I quote, "The transition toward renewable energy systems and distributed energy resources more broadly has already been set in motion by market forces and technology advancements. This transition is calling into question very basic assumptions about urban design and local land use planning. For example, designing a neighborhood to run on fossil fuels is very different from designing a neighborhood to run on renewable energy systems such as solar energy, district heating, or battery storage. Municipalities will need to respond to this market shift." End quote. We would like to see stronger support around renewable and district energy actions in the Guidebook. Including energy considerations in the Guidebook will improve public understanding of our energy use in our city and how the design and operation of our buildings and neighborhoods has direct impacts on our environment. In our written submission, we have included recommendations for specific updates to the Guidebook that can support renewable and district energy in the local area plans. We believe these recommendations are reasonable and could be easily incorporated into the next version of the Guidebook. In conclusion, the shift to integrating environmental and climate change considerations into how the city does planning is just beginning. While the early efforts are encouraging, we support faster and bolder action in future revisions of the Guidebook. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Before I call this panel to a close, I'll just do another call for the other folks who, I think at least one of them was just having trouble getting off of mute. Do we have Donald Thompson? Do we have Kent Manning?
Yes, Mayor Nenshi, I am here.
There you are. I think I made a mistake and called the wrong one last time. So, Mr. Manning, you've got the floor. You've got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Nenshi and councillors. Here, thank you for the time to bring some comment. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting today, at least virtually, because of this coronavirus COVID-19, on land owned by Calgary taxpayers. And I'm not Kent of Inglewood. I'm Kent Manning of the already great community of Mackenzie Lake. I'm not here to promote shaving my beard for charity or to broadcast my unkept hairstyle, but I am here to expose the pitfalls of this ridiculous guidebook proposal that is before Council, to expose how someone is shaving points to get this passed under the noses of taxpayers during a pandemic. This guidebook is not a good book. It's an ill-conceived, dogma-driven scheme to change our Calgary into a dream of a handful of persons. Cute name, glossy cover, nice graphics, horrible for communities, really bad. I'm not here to name drop by shamelessly misappropriating the Jack Long Foundation or Stuart House. I'm not here to tell you a fireside story about mentors and try to reshape the malleable minds of uninformed taxpayers. That doesn't fly with Calgary taxpayers. I'm here to drop names like Rao and Dawn, who live in communities that do not want this New York City idea imposed, shall we say, by elitists and developers. They do not want a fourplex or condo building next door to them. Jameson and Stephanie bought their home in Willow Park to have a yard for their son to play in and to have a nice big yard for their wiener dog to play in. These taxpayers choose these already great neighborhoods to enjoy life and to live in a peaceful neighborhood. A proposal like this guidebook throws a huge wrench into all of it. Property values will plummet, traffic chaos will very certainly occur, and it all flies in the face of the engineers and planners who planned roads and infrastructure for the current neighborhood populations. Water, sewer, and electrical infrastructure will be inadequate. Schools, parking, and noise levels will all be negatively affected. I'm speaking today to remind some councillors, particularly if I can mention Councillor Cara, and all other councillors, and this current mayor, Mayor Nenshi, who may or may not finish out their terms with a re-election. It might be a little bit early, but that Calgary taxpayers have not been involved in this process. The committee meeting in March 2020 heard from City Planning Department employees, specifically it's Miss Khan, I believe it was, Lisa Khan. I know that there was a plan to inform and educate Calgary taxpayers about this guidebook, but this simply hasn't happened. How do I know this? Because I've talked with hundreds, if not thousands, of taxpayers about issues and about this guidebook at their doorsteps, in particular, and many other City Hall issues, and they are really ticked off. The guidebook is an epic failure. I believe that this is one councillor's personal project to soft pedal this name, Guidebook for Great Neighborhoods, as some kind of innocuous and innocent pet project. But it is a virus that will infect our city and cause great harm. Trying to force this effort through against the will of the people during a pandemic will only further alienate and cause division. This type of decision, along with fluoride treatment and the 40-kilometer-hour speed limit zone, should be on the October ballot. Taxpayers must decide what they want. It's not acceptable to have city managers and a handful of city employees making these decisions behind closed doors. People are onto the scheme and they won't have it. Why the years of backroom secrecy about this plan? Why again does City Council think they know better than its citizens? I was also going to mention how in the review that they had in March 2020, Lisa Khan said that it's about finding out how to implement the municipal development plan in a community. And she said it's actually, what she said to the Sprawl was that we want to do engagement differently because the type of engagement that we've been doing in the past hasn't worked to get us to the outcomes that we need. We're not just standing up at a board speaking to you. We want to be engaging with you. Well, I've talked to many, many people about this who are very politically minded at their doorsteps, and no one has heard of this. And in many neighborhoods all across the city. So they've done a very bad job of trying to get the people involved. And I believe it is top-down, and it should be us as citizens, as taxpayers, that decide what happens in our city. We may not be city planners, but we should not be mushrooms on the north side of a tree and just fed a story. It would be respectful if City Council reserved this decision until after the election this fall, rushing it through when 5 or 6 of the candidates or the current city councillors are not going to be running, and some may not be reelected. They don't really have a mandate to be doing this kind of major change.
Mr. Manning, you're over time, so is that your final sentence, or you want one more?
Well, I would just say, please, councillors, respect the citizens, the taxpayers. Go back to the drawing board and involve the communities, perhaps in a plebiscite, or on October 18th, if we can vote after our councillors who are up for re-election can state what their positions and platforms are. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. And Tim Claughton, do we have you, Tim?
You do.
Aha, we've been trying to get you. Go ahead, Mr. Claughton.
Thank you very much. It's been a long day. When I wrote this, it was morning, but anyways, here we are. I want to thank everybody for putting their presentations together today. I'd like to acknowledge that I respect the revisions that have been requested by many communities. My name, as I said, is Tim Claughton, and I've been a resident of Renfrew and have been for the past 15 years. Back in the early 80s, I had the privilege of being a resident of 954 16th Avenue, commonly known as Midfield Trailer Park. That's where I started in Calgary. Then I moved to Castle Ridge and lived there for 18 years before coming to Renfrew. I've been always involved in my communities. I've worked hard with the communities. I've worked with a lot of different groups to help plan. I go to the Tourette's. I try to be involved and as up-to-date as I can on everything. And I consider myself fairly astute politically and following along. I, for one, tried reading through this guidebook, and there's a few things that came up. The first point speaks to the guidebook language. It has ambiguity as to what is said, what is meant, and what is ultimately decided. This can be confusing and lead to opposition in general. Making it clear exactly what is and what isn't allowed, street by street, is needed. Interpretation has been discussed on other planning matters earlier today, and the interpretation is extremely subjective to what is written and the words are used. I have seen situations in our community here in Renfrew where property values are starting to drop. You've got 2 infills that are big, 2-3 stories above, and one small house stuck in the middle. That person has not much choice as what to do with their home, and if they wanted to retire and stay there, they're now shaded out. You've got a single house on a 30 to 50-foot lot, and that's what they wanted, but now they have no sunshine. You drive around any community, you look at the proliferation of garbage bins and recycle bins throughout the alleys. They are an eyesore. Characters of the community changes with apartments and 4 to 6 plexes, because every time you have a 4 to 6 plex now, you also have the secondary suites, which adds to the traffic as well. Parking becomes an issue. Neighbors are upset with one another because they cannot park. They cannot have their family come and visit because there's nowhere to park. Or if they do, they have to park further away. This idea of having 4 to 6 plexes and they have no backyards, well, we've got a park down the street. We've got this. We've got other places to go. People can park their car and walk. Well, from the way this guidebook looks, I've got a big park 1 block long behind my house, but there's no guarantee it'll remain a park forever. But that's the basis on which some of these developments are getting approved. This creates bad neighbor relations. There's appropriate locations for density, so I want to add something of value here. There's lots of availability right on 16th Avenue between where the co-op is, between Edmonton Trail and Renfrew Ballpark. There's lots of land there that could take this density that is on the edge, as our councillor has spoken today, and it faces the main road, and it actually acts as a buffer for the community. Main Street should be developed with all units on the main street facing the main street. Right now, we've got a situation where a corner lot comes in, and because there's only one unit on that end, it's the end unit that is facing the main street. I say keep it that way. Edmonton Trail is a great and appropriate place for larger scale development that can come all the way up the hill, and however it has to happen. There's lots of opportunities there. There's lots of land to be bought. That's the appropriate place. Keep the core more inclusive to what it is today, with smaller developments, duplexes, some threeplexes, and any way you slice it, a fourplex with suites in the bottom is now an eightplex, no matter how you look at it. Parking again becomes the issue. Over and again, parking is the issue. And this notion that we're within 500 meters of a bus stop, or there's other opportunities for different types of driving. Fact of the matter is, most people drive to and from. They take their kids to sports, they take their kids elsewhere. Taking the bus is not their option. However, those that choose to have that ability within a neighborhood. Often when these changes are made, the people that are most affected are not listened to in many, many cases. There's a case in point right now in our community of Renfrew, right across the street from Pow Pizza. I sat and listened as council changed the land use designation from an R1 to a fiveplex opportunity. Now the building is going up, and it's starting to reminisce to everybody exactly what they were saying when they opposed it, but council turned around and changed the rules. That person now has to sit with 5 people staring into his backyard. This is inappropriate. It's not fair.
You're just over time, sir, so I'll ask you to wrap up in one sentence, if you could, please.
Okay, I'll make it real simple then. I will slide right over to the last one that I had. And the question to you is this guidebook a recipe for disaster? Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, that takes us to the end of this panel, and in fact, the end of all of our panels for this evening. There are a few questions for this panel, so we'll deal with those, and then we'll break for the night. I'll go to Councillor Farrell first.
Thank you. I think my first question is for Mr. Horner. Are you there, Mr. Horner?
I am, yes.
Thank you.
I am.
You mentioned in your presentation that that development brought in people who did not fit, and I'm wondering if you could explain what you mean by that.
That was the case in Dallas because, of course, in that part of the country, they have a bit of an issue with race. But in any event, I mean, it was really the development that didn't fit, but ultimately it destroyed that beautiful neighborhood because when I went back years later, it was gone. And Dallas has learned from those mistakes, and they provide real historic protection now to communities.
Oh, so it was an issue of people of different race coming into a neighborhood that didn't fit? Or?
Well, that's what I think. And the developer there was trying to blockbust the neighborhood, so he was doing his best to move people in who wouldn't fit with the residents already. That's what's tending to happen down there. And that is what developers use in blockbusting.
We don't see that here, and
we don't see that here.
And we don't
I agree that we see that here, and I'm glad that we don't see that here. But that I was referring to what I experienced in Dallas.
All right. Well, let's keep it relevant. And then my question to Mr. Manning. Mr. Manning, did you mean to mock a land acknowledgement in your first sentence?
What are you saying to me?
Your opening sentence was similar to our land acknowledgement. And I'm wondering if you were doing that to mock a land acknowledgement.
This is where I said I'd like to acknowledge we're meeting today, at least virtually, because of coronavirus, COVID-19 on land owned by Calgary taxpayers.
Yes.
I think you're trying to create a problem, Councillor Farrell, much like you are trying to do about the race issue about Dallas. I could also weigh in on the Dallas situation because I live there as well.
I am asking you, sir. I'm asking you if that was your intent. If it wasn't, then we can move on. If it was, then I
would ask you to read it for what it is and what I said. It is not the city of Calgary owned by taxpayers.
well, not all of it, no, actually.
This is most of the problem with City Council. You don't concentrate on fiscal responsibility.
This is not a time for debate, Mr. Manning. You'll have lots of time for that in the next few months. You've answered her question. Thank you. No, you answered her question.
Concentrate on fiscal responsibility, Mayor.
Sir, you answered her question. Thank you, sir. You answered her question.
Social problems like that.
Sir, don't make me hang up the bridge. You've answered her question. Thank you.
Well, your other councillors have done that to me too. That's rude. That's wrong.
Thanks, Mr. Manning. You're speaking over me. Please stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Councillor Carra, please.
Well, that was some pretty overt racism. I have a question for Martina Walsh. Miss Walsh, I spent my Saturday delivering food hampers in largely single detached dwelling neighborhoods in East Calgary. And I was intrigued to hear your thesis stated pretty clearly that Elbow Park, Rideau, Roxborough are stable neighborhoods because they are with great schools and great parks and great amenities because they are single detached neighborhoods. And I was wondering if you would opine on maybe the fact that the residents of those communities are amongst the wealthiest in the city, if that maybe has something to do with it also, or maybe even instead. And I'd just love for you to share some of your thoughts in that regard with us after being so clear in your statements to us about the role of the single detached. Yeah.
Sure. I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to pinpoint that Elbow Park is financially a well-off community as compared to where you were delivering your hampers on the weekend. Is that correct?
That's a very astute summation of my question, and I'm asking you if you think that has something to do with the stability of that of the neighborhood you stated, as opposed to maybe just its single detached character.
No, I feel that our community is a very stable community because people want to live here because it's an inner city community with single detached lots, single detached homes. And yes, we are fortunate in that we have good community schools. But Councillor, I think that there's many communities across this city that are not, I would say, economically perhaps as well off as Elbow Park, but they still have single family homes. They may not be as financially high level. I'm looking for the right words, but they too, because of their single family components, are wonderful places to live. I don't think it really has to do with, the amount of money in your bank account. I think it has to do with the community feel that each community has.
Have you read the guidebook, Ms. Walsh?
Of course I have. In fact, I read both versions of the guidebook. I have attended I've attended the Guidebook 101 training. I have attended training sessions on the local area plan. I've attended courses through the Federation. And yes, sir, I have become quite knowledgeable about this document.
And and it is your position that Elbow Park is okay. Thank you for your presentation today. I found it edifying. One last question to Mr. Claughton. Mr. Claughton, are you still there?
I am.
Did you participate in the development of the North Hill Plan, which is the first of the local area plans impacting Renfrew, specifically creating a local area plan for the first time ever for your community that's being empowered by the Guidebook?
Actually, no, I didn't, and the reason for that is that after 30-some years of sitting on several boards and community organizations helping in other areas, I chose to follow along with the public side of it now. otherwise it would have. But it is time consuming. People come to these opportunities here at the council, and I often feel and wonder why people put all that investment of time and effort into it. As we've heard today, there are so many people that come back and go, "You're not listening." That's one of the reasons why I don't do it anymore. I'll help my local community when they need a hand.
Okay. Well, thanks for everything you do for your local community. Thank you, sir.
Thanks,
no
Councillor Crow.
Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Crow. Let's go to Councillor Chu, please. Councillor Chu, are you there?
Yes, I
Super.
am.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. So my question would be for Mr. Manning. You there, Mr. Manning?
Yes, I am, Councillor Chu.
Okay, thank
sir.
you. My question to you would be, as you have heard, many speakers and who has spoke up about being called, giving out misinformation, and it feels like, anytime people disagree with us, we call them anti-this, anti-that, and then you give out misinformation. How do you feel about that? Are you giving out misinformation, and are you speaking from the bottom of your heart?
I'm just saying, if I can understand this, I'm saying that the number of people that I've had contact with over the last couple of years, and most recently just in the last few months, who have known about this guidebook, they first of all, most of them have not even heard about it if you mention it to them, and they only hear one side, that everybody's been consulted, and it's a very good thing, and there doesn't seem to be much opportunity to raise dissenting opinions or other ideas, or even to be individually consulted. They feel really, I would say, hurt, actually, that after paying so much into taxes and loving their city and being true Calgarians, proud of their city, they're not asked what their opinions are. They're just, something just gets pushed through. At least it gives them that feeling that they're not being respected. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, so I take it that you're not purposely giving out misinformation.
Oh, no. I wouldn't say that, no. What I've seen is that people, if you encourage them to seek out information, they will. And if you just even mention the guidebook and how there's something major happening in the planning department of the city, which even the city department will and the proponents for it will tell you that it is a major new change, one that they see as positive. The average homeowner or resident in the city doesn't seem to know much about it, and you just ask an opinion of somebody, have you heard about this? And they just say, no, I haven't heard anything about it. How do I find out anything more about it? And obviously they've not received anything in the mail with their NMAX bill or anything from their city councillor. Doesn't seem to have been very effective to communicate and involve them. Perhaps because if they did, that department in the city might actually get an answer that was, not what they wanted to get.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Chu.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Chu. Let's go to Councillor Gondek, please.
Nope, retracted.
Oh, sorry. Missed that. All right, thank you, everybody. We are going to stop here. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. with panel number 7. See you in the morning. Thank you all.